Yo, what's up, nerds? It's MTG Man. So today I'm gonna be looking at. Let me get the music on, actually. All right, what's up, nerds? It's MTG Man, and welcome to my Foundations new card review. So Foundations is a massive fucking set. All right, it's like 700 cards, and sure, that's because every card has like 3 or 4 fucking arts. Because that's just what we do on every set. We have to have anime art, and we have to have the the. Let's be real here, right? When we're doing these full arts, right? This ain't necessary. Nobody cares about this. Ooh, you can see through the box a little bit. You can see around the border. Nobody cares about that shit. Alright, you give us this art, you give us this art, and you give us, well, this is the same art, but, we only need two. Alright, that's all we need. But anywho, I'm going to be looking at the new cards coming out in Foundations. Because there's a ton of reprints, there's a ton of cool looking cards, but I think the new cards are what's going to be the most interesting for people, so let's just get into it. Starting off, Soulstone Sanctuary. Tap it for colorless, you can pay for it, and it becomes a 3/3 with all creature types. It's still a land. Um, Interesting. Giving it all creature types, I really like, because this can just go into any sort of typal deck. You can put this in slivers, have it become a creature, and it's just like a free extra sliver to swing in with. So I actually like this a lot more than a lot of other creature lands. I'm gonna give this a solid, like, 6 out of 10. I'm gonna give cards ratings now. This is my thing. Bolt Wave. Bolt Wave deals 3 damage to each opponent. Put this in Sulfim the Pain Dominus, and I really like it. I'm gonna give this card a 5 out of 10. It seems very gimmicky. I'm putting this in mostly a commander lens because, each opponent commander, that just seems about right. I don't really know all that. Well, I know a fair bit about standard and modern to some extent, but uh I'm no expert. All right, I've watched deck guides, I've watched tournaments, I've been in a tournament, but I'm no expert, so I'm not gonna put in my opinion about standard and modern. I'm just talking commander here. Divine Resilience, 5 out of 10, by the way. Divine Resilience, target creature gains indestructible. If this spell is kicked, instead any number of target creatures you control gain indestructible until end of turn. So a 4 mana give your creatures indestructible, or a 1 mana give one creature indestructible. I'm just gonna give this like a 5 out of 10. It's not bad in any way. I think giving you options is good. But if you want to protect your board, you're better off playing like Teferi's Protection or Heroic Intervention or any of those cards. And if you want to protect one creature, most of the time it's better to blink a creature rather than give it indestructible. At least in my opinion. So yeah, 5 out of 10. Fishing Pole, it's 1. Equipped creature has 1 and tap fishing pole, put a bait counter on fishing pole. And then whenever a equipped creature becomes untapped, remove a bait counter from this equipment. If you do, create a 1/1 fish. So I don't you can't activate the ability if fishing pole's already tapped. So you're stuck to 1 fish per turn cycle. I think it's very flavorful. But not very good. I don't see any way you can loop it because you have to tap fishing pole. So you have to untap 2 creatures, and it's 1 like, I just don't see it going infinite anyway. Or it would just be really convoluted. Either way, I think this is like a 2, maybe a 3. It's not bad. Creating a 1/1 every turn cycle isn't bad, but it's just not as good as I think it needs to be. Fleeting Flight. Put a +1/+1 counter on a target creature. It gains flying until end of turn. Prevent all combat damage that would be dealt to it this turn. I think flying and prevent all combat damage are kind of like, I don't want to say, like, because if it has flying, it's probably not being blocked unless they have other flyers. So I don't know how much damage is going to be dealt to it anyway. It's definitely not bad. I'd give it like a 2 out of 10. This is probably more of a standard card than a commander card. Or probably more of a draft card, honestly. Hinterland Sanctifier. Whenever another creature you control enters, you gain 1 life. This is like another Soul Warden, except it doesn't count your opponent's creatures, so it's less good. But like a 1 mana one, and it's a 1/2, I'd give it like a 5 out of 10. I think it's pretty solid, especially if that's the sort of ability you're looking for. I think it's pretty good. Infestation Sage. When this creature dies, create a 1/1 black and green insect token with flying. I'm just going to give it like a 2 out of 10. There's definitely some sort of deck that wants this, but I just don't see it really going much of anywhere. Joust Through. Deals 3 damage to target attacking or blocking creature, and you gain 1 life. Again, definitely not a commander card. I think you're better off playing Lightning Bolt, or if you're playing white, honestly, you're better off playing Path to Exile, Swords to Plowshares, anything like that. So I'm just gonna give it like a 1. Kellen, Planar Trailblazer, starts as a 1 mana 2/1, and then you can pay 1 in a red. If it's a scout, it becomes a detective, and gains, when it deals combat damage to a player, exile the top card of your library you can play at this turn. And if it's a detective, it becomes a fairy rogue and gains double strike. So I think it keeps the exiling the top card ability even once it becomes a rogue. I guess technically it's not. As a commander, it comes down turn 1, and then on turn 2, it's kind of like Ragavan. No, it's not like Ragavan, it's your own library, not your opponent's, sorry. And it's card advantage turn 2, and then turn 3, it's double card advantage because double strike if you can get in. I think it's definitely kind of interesting. I don't know, I'm just gonna give it like a 5. It doesn't seem all that powerful, though. Stab, target creature gets -2/-2 until end of turn. Just play, what, Tragic Slip? It's, Tragic Slip is the same cost, except it gives -1/-1, unless a creature died this turn, in which case it deals, -13/-13. I feel like that's just going to be better in most instances, so I'd give Stab like a 1. Anthem of Champions gives creatures you control +1/+1. Certain decks like Anthems a lot, you know, your Glorious Anthem, all that shit, so, I mean, in go wide decks, it's definitely good. I'd give it like a 6-ish. Bulk Up. Double target creature's power until end of turn, and it has Flashback. I think Flashback is nice because getting to recast this could win you a game, honestly. But doubling target creature's power is only really gonna matter in so many decks. I guess I'd give it like a 2. It's not bad, but it's only gonna matter in certain decks. Courageous Goblin. Whenever this creature attacks while you control a creature with power 4 or greater, this creature gets +1/+0 and gains menace until end of turn. I'd give it a 1. It's definitely not a commander card. Crystal Barricade. 2 mana, 0/4 Defender. You have Hexproof. Prevent all non-combat damage that would be dealt to other creatures you control. I'm gonna give this card like a 4. I think certain decks are gonna want this because this stops things like Blasphemous Act, or Chain Lightning, things like that, where... Not Chain Lightning, Chain Reaction? Chain Reaction. Well, it would stop Chain Lightning too, but it'll protect your board and it'll protect you. So, I mean, it's pretty decent. It's just only certain decks are really going to want this kind of effect. Dawning Marshal. For a 2 mana, 2/2 flying, 4 and a white, creatures you control get +1/+1 until end of turn. I mean, a board pump is good, but it just doesn't seem very commandery. I'm gonna give it like a 1. I'm probably not gonna give anything a 0, because everything could find some sort of deck, or it's good in a deck when you need a budget, you know, things like that. Drake Hatcher. Oh, hell no. or 2 mana, 1/3 Vigilance Prowess. When it deals combat damage to a player, put that many incubation counters on it. Remove 3 incubation counters and create a 2/2 Drake with flying. Any sort of proliferate deck this could definitely be good in. The fact that you need 3 counters to create a 2/2, so even if you cast 2 spells, then swing in, your payoff is a 2/2. Whereas, like, I mean, that could be good. I'm gonna give it like a 4. I just don't think it does enough. You know, we have like this is the only problem. Secrets, is it? Shit. How am I not remembering what this guy's called? Basically, there's this funny guy, and he creates a 1/1 bird every time you cast an instant or sorcery. This creates a 2/2 Drake, but you have to cast 2 instances for... Like, there's just so much to get this 2/2 that it just doesn't seem worth it, is what I'm saying. Elementalist Adept, probably a 3, actually. I'm giving it a 3. Elementalist Adept, Flash Prowess. Unless your deck really cares about Flash, I'm just going to give this a 1. It doesn't seem worth it most of the time. Goblin Negotiation deals X damage to target creature, and then you create a number of 1/1 goblins equal the amount of excess damage dealt to that creature this way. This goes in Rowan. Definitely. And then other than Rowan, I'm not too sure. I mean, there are certain decks that are good at casting X spells. You know, like, if you had a deck that had red in it and was playing Hydras, so that you have, like, your Rites of Flourishing and whatever that cares about X spells, maybe I could get it. But other than that, I'm just going to give it a 3. I'm going to give something a 3 if I can just think of a deck for it, at least. Because this could definitely go in Rowan and be pretty good. Heir Apparent. 1 and a white for a 2/2. When it enters, create a number of rabbit tokens equal to the number of other creatures you control named Heir Apparent, and a deck can have any number of cards named Heir Apparent. I feel like there's some sort of joke I'm missing, but it multiplies your board. So, you know, you have 1 out, and it creates none, and then you play your second one, and that'll create 1, and then your third one will create 2, your fourth one will create 3. So, I mean, it can make your board get pretty big. I do like that you can have any number of them. So there is some sort of interesting deck to be made here. Plus, if there was any sort of rabbit tribe typal commander, this would just be a shoo-in. Not like a shoo-in, but it would be a pretty good build-in. I'm gonna give it a 4. I think it's just because I like it. This definitely isn't as strong as, say, like, Knights Templar or Dragon's Approach or Persistent Petitioners. This isn't that level of strong as far as I can tell. But it still seems interesting. Helpful Hunter. When it enters, draw a card. It's 1 and a white. It's a 1/1. Any deck that's playing Spirited Companion should probably play this instead because it's not an enchantment. Unless the deck cares that Spirited Companion is an enchantment, this is just harder to remove Spirited Companion. So this is great in Flicker decks because you can flicker it, draw an extra card. It's great in cat decks because it's just a good 1/1 cat that draws you a card. I'm gonna give it like a 5, which may seem like overrating, but I like my little creatures that I can play for 1, and then, well, you play it for 2, but you get back a card, basically, is what I'm saying. I like recyclable creatures. Hungry Ghoul, 1 and a black, pay 1, sacrifice another creature, put a +1/+1 counter on this creature. I like that it's a counter and not +1/+1 until end of turn. I think that's a step in the right direction. The fact you have to pay 1 kind of hurts. I'm gonna give it a 2. This is definitely better than like a 1 because I can see some use for this, but I can't see a deck that wants this specifically. Because most of the time, if I'm thinking sack outlets, I want something like Viscera Seer, where all I have to do is sacrifice the creature, right? Or if I'm not playing Viscera Seer and I have to pay some sort of mana, I need some sort of better payoff for that. Mischievous Mystic. When you draw your second card each turn, create a 1/1 blue fairy with flying, and it's a flying 2/1 for 2. I think this is pretty good if you can consistently draw 2. Just, if you have Consecrated Sphinx out, big ask, I know, but you'll be creating 4. You'll be creating 4 of them every turn cycle, which is pretty good, but the fact you need to make sure you're drawing that many cards can be a little bit tricky. You know, things like Mind's Eye could help, because that could draw you multiple cards each turn, but there's just no guarantee. So I'm going to give it like a 4, because I could definitely see certain decks that want to draw cards and want to draw cards on the opponent's turn. Using this, you know, if you have a Rhystic Study out, this could just be free. Not like free mana-wise, but like free fairies every turn cycle. But that can't be guaranteed, so I'm just going to give it a 4. Quick Draw Katana. During your turn, equipped creature has +2/+0 and first strike, and nothing on other turns. I don't get it. Like, if it's quick draw, shouldn't they be able to have it at any time? I don't get that. I don't think for 4 mana total, because it's 2 to play it and 2 to equip it, +2/+0 and first strike only during your turn is good enough. I'm just gonna give it a 2. It's not flat out bad, but it's not that good, as far as I can tell. Ravenous Amulet. 2 mana, pay 1, tap it, and sacrifice a creature. Draw a card, put a soul counter on this artifact. Activate only as a sorcery. 4, tap, sacrifice this artifact. Each opponent loses life equal to the number of soul counters on this artifact. I'm gonna give this a 1. I think this is bad. Unless you're, like, proliferating the soul counters or something, you'll get 1 each turn cycle. And then, let's just say, you know, you've had it for 5 turns, right? Which also means you sacrificed 5 creatures. And sure, you drew 5 cards, but you could probably do better things with those 5 creatures. Unless you have, like, an Ophiomancer. You know, with Ophiomancer, you are just drawing an extra card because you're just going to keep creating those snakes. I guess then this isn't bad, but I don't know. Being able to sacrifice it to then deal 5 damage is, like, not that impressive. And I just... I'm gonna give it a 2 because I could see this being good in a deck that's consistently creating tokens. This is an extra draw for 1 mana, but even then, that just doesn't quite feel like enough. Sanguine Siphon. When this creature attacks, each opponent loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. This is a 1. It's bad. Seer Slicer Goblin. 1 in a red. Raid at the beginning of your end step. If you attacked, create a 1/1 red goblin. It's definitely okay. I'd give it like a 2 or a 3. I mean, that's 1 goblin most. But, I mean, in a deck that wants creatures dying, like any sort of aristocrat deck, this is just 1 extra token each turn because you can go, I attack with my 1/1 goblin, then if that goblin dies during combat, you get your aristocrat triggers. If that goblin doesn't die, you sacrifice it to Viscera Seer, and then you get your aristocrat triggers. And then Seer Slicer Goblin sees that a goblin attacked, creates another goblin, that goblin attacks next turn. So I can kind of see the vision. I just don't think it's perfect. So I'm gonna give it like a 4. Definitely not bad. It's just not as good as it could be. Sky Knight Squire. Whenever another creature you control enters, put a +1/+1 counter on this creature. As long as this creature has 3 or more counters on it, it has flying and is a knight. So it starts as a 2-mana 1/1 and gets bigger with each creature you control. I think this is good for token decks. It could be like an alt-win con where, oh, if I create 20 tokens, I'm also putting 20 counters on Sky Knight Squire, and it has flying, so then it can attack in for like 20 damage or whatever. But even then, that's just like not the best use. I guess I'll give it a 3. It's not bad by any means. Any deck that's creating a bunch of creatures could definitely take good advantage of it. It's just not super strong. I mean, flying is good, but it's easily removable, at least to start off. Slumbering Cerberus doesn't untap during your untap step, and at the beginning of each end step, if a creature died this turn, untap this creature. So I mean, a 2-mana 4/2 is good. It could be a solid blocker. It doesn't untap during your untap step. There's definitely some sort of deck that wants cheap creatures with high power. I'm just blanking on what that deck is. If it had a way to, if there was an enchantment you could put on it, to tap it and kill something, so that you could just do it every turn, that could be really good. You could like Sylvan Longbow and then Death Touch or something, but that's just like a little bit too much effort. It's really hard to say how good this is, but I'm just gonna give it a 2 because I feel like there could be some use here. Strix Lookout, flying, vigilance, pay 1 in a blue, tap it, draw a card, then discard. A 1/2 looter. I'm gonna put it at 1. I just feel like there's better looters. Flying and vigilance is good, but it's just not too impressive, at least to me. Sunblessed Healer, 1 in a white, 3/1, kicker, lifelink. When it enters, if it was kicked, return target non-land permanent card with mana value 2 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. Easy. Any deck playing Lurrus probably wants this thing. So since I can name a place for it, that being Lurrus, I have to give it at least a 3. And I think in total, I'm going to give it a 5. I think getting able to recur something small, even if it doesn't matter all that much, is going to add up over time. I mean, like, it's just a solid creature with a solid ability, so I'm just going to give it a 5. You can bring back your small creatures, you can bring back auras that matter, because, sometimes just all that glitters or ethereal armor or whatever just make a creature big enough to swing in for a game, and being able to get it back with Sunblessed Healer, I think is pretty good, especially because it's not back to hand, it's back to battlefield, so it's basically free whatever you get back, since you paid the 2 mana for kicker. Tiny Bones Bauble Burglar, 1 and a black, 1/3. When an opponent discards a card, exile it from their graveyard with a stash counter on it. During your turn, you may play cards you don't own with stash counters on them from exile, and mana of any color can be used to cast those spells. 3 and a black, each opponent discards a card, activate only as a sorcery. I have this like terrible cough that y'all can't hear, but any sort of discard deck that isn't Tergrid wants this, because Tergrid's doing her own thing. Yeah, it's good. I'm gonna give it like a 7. It works really well as its own commander. Though I think any deck that's making your opponent discard is gonna want this. Vampire Gourmand, 1 and a black, 2/2. When this creature attacks, you can sacrifice another creature. If you do, draw a card, and this creature can't be blocked this turn. Making it unblockable is good. If it didn't have that, it can't be blocked, I think it would be a lot worse. Though I do just think sacrificing 1 creature to draw a card is a little bit underwhelming, especially since you're only doing it once per turn cycle. I'm just gonna give it a 1, 2, 1.5. I don't think it's useless. I just don't. Well, I guess in something like Edgar Markov, which is creating 1/1 vampires when you cast vampires. I guess you could just sacrifice those 1/1s to keep drawing cards. I guess that could be pretty good. If I remember correctly how Edgar works. Yeah, whenever you cast another vampire, you create a 1/1 vampire. So I mean, like, you could sacrifice the 1/1s that Edgar creates, and that could be pretty solid, honestly. I think there is some value there, so I'm just gonna give it a 2. I'm not get. I know I said if I could find it a deck, I'd give it 3, but I think Edgar has better things to run, so I'm just gonna give it a 2. Vengeful Blood Witch. When this creature or another creature you control dies, target opponent loses 1 life and you gain a life. This is just like Blood Artist, but like worse? Question mark. I mean, Blood Artist is a same cost, 0/1. When it or another creature dies, target player loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. So Blood Artist counts your opponent's creatures too. So I think it's just better. But it's not bad because, you know, Aristocrat's deck won a bunch of this kind of ability. So I mean, I'll give it a 5 because I can definitely see decks for it. Anything Aristocrat-y, you know, but I just don't think I can give it better than that because it's worse than Blood Artist, in my opinion. Zur Ashur Lich Lord. Ward 2, or Ward, pay 2 life, 2 mana, 2/2, and you can cast target zombie from your graveyard this turn. Very simple, but I think being able to recast a zombie is pretty good. If you have any way to give your spells flash with something Vidalcan Worry, I guess, and you could find a way to untap Zolashur, being able to cast a zombie every turn could be good. But other than that, I think it's just mediocre. It's kind of meh as its own commander, but I think in any zombie deck, just being able to recast a zombie is going to be pretty valuable. So I'm going to give it like a 6. Abyssal Harvester. Jesus, how many cards are in this set real quick? I'm not even halfway done, dog. Abyssal Harvester. 1 black, 3/2. Exile target creature card from a graveyard that was put there this turn. Create a token that's a copy of it, except it's a nightmare. Then exile all other nightmare tokens you control. Kind of reminds me of... what does it remind me of? I was almost going to say that 2 black, Dauthi Voidwalker, because Dauthi Voidwalker can steal creatures that go to the graveyard. But it's not quite that, because it doesn't exile everything, so it's less useful. But I mean, being able to create a token copy of something that was put into a graveyard is pretty good, especially in mill decks, or just anything that's destroying creatures. Creating copies is always going to be pretty good, so I'm just going to put it at like a 7. I can see a lot of decks that could use this, especially, it doesn't even have to be your opponent's creatures. If you just need like another, you know, your Spirited Companion dies, or whatever that cat is that I just looked at, you know, a creature that says when it enters the battlefield, draw a card. If you should need to draw a card, you sacrifice that creature, you tap Abyssal Harvester, you create a nightmare copy of it, you draw that card. So it's a good way to copy ETBs, kind of, for things that, you know, already ETB'd and you killed. But yeah, I'd give it like a 7. Alesha, Who Laughs at Fate. 1 black, red, first strike. When it attacks, put a +1/+1 counter on it. Beginning of your end step, if you attack this turn, return target creature with mana value less than or equal to Alesha's power from your graveyard to the battlefield. So it recurs a creature, which I think is good, but it has to have less power. So first time it attacks, you get back a 2 mana cost creature. Second time it attacks, you get a 3 cost. I think that's definitely good. This deck can mill itself. Things like book burning, whatever. I think it could be pretty solid, so I'm just going to give it like a 5. I don't know how good it is, but it could see play as a commander or in the main board of a commander deck. So I'm just going to give it a 5. Ambush Wolf, 2 and a green, 4/2, flash. When it enters, exile up to 1 target card from a graveyard. I think it's just a good stat block. Plus flash, plus exiling a card from a graveyard. I'm gonna give it like a 3. I could definitely see some sort of deck that wants this, but I can't name that deck. I mean, definitely any wolf deck probably plays it because it's one of the better wolves out there. Erebos, the first Fang. Other cats get +1/+1. When it or another non-token cat enters, create a 1/1 cat token. This goes in every cat deck. Plus, it could be a good cat commander, so I'm going to give it a 6. Giving it a 6. I like cats. I have the Secret Lair Erebos hanging up in my room because I got it for Christmas a couple years ago, and it looked like my cat who recently passed. But yeah, I love Erebos. It was I think it was my first commander. I didn't even know what commander was as a format. I bought the deck because it looked cool, and I brought it to summer camp, and everybody's like, wow, why are you playing 100 cards? And I was like, I don't know. I don't know why this deck has so many cards. But it was fun, you know? Cats are cool. Beastkin Ranger. 2 and a green, 3/3 trample. Whenever another creature you control enters, this creature gets +1/+0 until end of turn. 1. There's probably some use for it, but 1. Cat Collector. 2 and a white. When this creature enters, create a food token. Whenever you gain life for the first time during each of your turns, create a 1/1 cat. That's what kills it. Each of your turns. So you can create 1 cat per turn cycle. Could be good in some sort of life gain deck. Could be good in some sort of food deck. I'm going to give it a 2. I really like the art, honestly. Makes me happy. Celestial Armor. 2 and a white, flash. When this equipment enters, attach it to target creature you control. That creature gets hexproof and indestructible until end of turn. Equipped creature gets +2/+0 and has flying. The fact that it equips instantly, I think, is probably what makes this okay. Even then, hexproof and indestructible for 1 turn really ain't all that. So I'm gonna give it like a 4. I think it's kind of overcosted for that. If it was 2 mana, gave hexproof and indestructible, and then just flying or something, I think that could see play. But +2/+0 and flying, I don't see. Cephalid Inkmage. When this creature enters, Surveil 3. So 3 mana, 2/2, Surveil 3 is pretty good. And it can't be blocked as long as there are 7 or more cards in your graveyard. I'm gonna give it a 2. Surveilling 3 is actually pretty good. But I just can't think of a specific deck for this. Crackling Cyclops. 2 and a red, 0/4. When you cast a non-creature spell, it gets +3/+0 until end of turn. Doesn't have trample. I'm giving it a 1. Dauntless Veteran. When it attacks, creatures you control get +1/+1 until end of turn. Normally, I would say no to something like this. However, like a month ago, I built that Nico deck, where he creates a bunch of shards, or they create a bunch of shards, and then those shards become a copy of a creature. Creating a bunch of Dauntless Veterans and having them all attack at once, and then they all bump each other up, I think could be really good for that sort of deck. You know, any deck that's creating a bunch of Dauntless Veterans is going to be good. So I'm going to give it a 3, just for that. Dazzling Angel. Whenever another creature you control enters, you gain 1 life. Flying 2/3. Again, the Soul Warden-like creatures are pretty good. I don't think flying is enough to make this be worth 3 mana. If this was a 2 mana 1/2 flying with the ability, I think it would be better. I just don't think a 3 mana 2/3 is going to be worth it. There are better things to be doing with 3 mana on curve. So I'm going to give it like a 4, 3 or 4. It's not bad, but definitely not as good as it could be. Dreadwing Scavenger. 1 blue-black. When it enters or attacks, draw, then discard. Flying 2/2. This creature gets +1/+1 and has Death Touch as long as there are 7 or more cards in your graveyard. I like that it loots when it attacks or enters. Flying, I'm gonna give it a 1. No, I'm gonna give it a 2. I don't see a specific deck for it, but it's not bad. Dropkick Bomber. Other goblins get +1/+1 5. Pay 1 red until end of turn. Another target goblin you control gains flying, and when this creature deals combat damage, sacrifice it. Yeah, basically anything that's gonna bump up goblins is at least a 5. And I think giving a goblin flying until end of turn is actually pretty solid, especially because you don't always expect goblins to survive their attack anyway. Put Shared Animosity onto the board, then swing with 7 goblins, give them all flying, and it really doesn't matter, if they die at the end of turn anyway, because it probably weren't surviving. You're just going to deal a shit ton of damage. So I'm going to give it like a 6.5. Eager Truffle Snout. Trample. When this creature deals combat damage to a player, create a food token. 2 mana 4/2 or 3 mana 4/2. Not bad. I just don't see a deck for this. I mean, sure, food decks, but like, So I'm going to give it a 1. Electro Duplicate. 2 and a red. Create a token that's a copy of target creature you control, except it has haste. At the beginning of the end step, sacrifice this token, and you can flashback it for 4. I don't think it's bad. I'm just going to give it a 4 because I don't see a specific deck for it, but being able to copy things is good, and red doesn't really get too many of those abilities, so I'm just going to call it a 4, and I will leave it at that. Well, red gets some of those abilities. I guess I'm not leaving it at that, but I'm just going to give it a 4. Iridite Wizard. 2 and a blue for a 2/3. When you draw your second card each turn, put a +1/+1 counter on this creature. There's this older card, not older, but it's a 4 mana octopus, I think, that has the exact same ability, but it's a 3/3. This is just 1 cost less for 1 power less. I would just call this better, so any decks that are playing that sort of thing. No, wait, that octopus is every draw. Sorry, not just once per turn. Yeah, this card's a 1. Feybloom Trick. 2 and a blue. Create 2/1 blue, or create 2/1/1 blue fairy tokens with flying. When you do, tap target creature an opponent controls. Blue tokens deck or fairy deck. I'll give it a 2. I think creating tokens is always good, but just tapping 1 creature really isn't enough. If you put 2 stun counters on it, then I would consider. Or 3 stun counters, whatever. So yeah, just like a 2. Felling Blow. 2 and a green. Put a +1/+1 counter on target creature you control, and that creature deals damage equal to its power to target creature an opponent controls. It's a 1. There's better ways to make things fight or deal damage to whatever. I just don't think, like, take Rabid Bite. Rabid Bite does the same thing, except no +1/+1 counter, but it only costs 1 and a green. I don't think the counter is worth the 1 extra mana. Fiery Annihilation. 2 and a red. Deals 5 damage to target creature. Exile up to 1 target equipment attached to that creature. If that creature would die this turn, exile it instead. It's a 1. It's just not worth it. Fire Spitter Whelp. 2 and a red. When you cast a non-creature or dragon spell, it deals 1 damage to each opponent. Flying 2/2 for 3. So I mean, generally the, pingers that deal, not pinger, but it deals damage whenever you cast a non-creature spell are pretty good. And being able to add dragons to that, so like a weird dragon spell slinger, I kind of dig it, and I'm gonna give it like a 4. Dragons are usually big spells, so I don't know how much that 1 extra damage is gonna matter, but I think it's interesting. I think that's interesting design, so I'm gonna give it a 4. Goblin Borders. 2 and a red, 3/2. When an attack, or it enters with a +1/+1 counter if you attack this turn. I'm gonna give it a 1. I just don't see a good deck for it. Goblin Surprise, 2 in a red. You either create 2 1/1 goblins, or creatures you control get +2/+0 until end of turn. Let me think. There is a Adventures in the Forgotten Realms card. You see a pair of goblins. Goblin Surprise and You See a Pair of Goblins are the same card, as far as I can tell. They do exactly the same thing. So I mean, honestly, I would give it a 2. I think there's definitely a place for these kind of cards where it gives you the options. I think there are definitely decks that want it, but it's not that great. Gutless Plunderer, 2 in a black, Death Touch. When it enters, if you attack this turn, look at the top 3 cards of your library. You may put 1 on top and put the rest into your graveyard. It's good card selection. I think it would have... I'm just going to give it a 1. I really like it. I like the art a lot. I like the name. But I'm just going to have to give it a 1 because it's not really putting any cards in hand. It just doesn't seem quite good enough. Plus, you need to have already attacked. I'm just going to give it a 1. Infernal Vessel. I really like this art. This art feels a lot older. You know, like if you go from this to this, if you told me this was an older card, I would definitely believe you. And I really like that. Infernal Vessel is a 3-mana 2/1. When it dies, if it wasn't a demon, return it to the battlefield under your control with 2 +1/+1 counters, and it's a demon now. There is a you know, what sucks about doing a card search this way is that now I have to like really look sometimes. Hold on. This guy, which can make target creature lose all creature types. So you could make it not a demon anymore to keep looping it. Though I think that ends once it goes to the graveyard. So you make it not a demon. So you sack it, comes back as a demon. Then you make it not a demon, sack it again, it'll come back a demon. But then you'd have to re-tap Amoeboid Changeling in order for you to be able to loop it. So I'm not quite sure, unless you had like Intruder Alarm, in which case I think you could just keep bringing it back like that. Which is pretty good. I kind of like that idea, but it seems like a lot more investment than it's worth. Inspiration from Beyond is next. Mill 3, then return instant or sorcery from your graveyard to your hand. Flashback. There's probably a deck for this, but I'm just gonna give it a 1. I think 3 for Mill 3, and then return instant or sorcery. You have to have some damn good instant or sorceries for that to be worth it. So I'm just gonna give it a 3. Or a 1. Inspiring Paladin, 2 and a white for a 3/3. During your turn, it has first strike. During your turn, creatures you control with a +1/+1 counter on them have first strike. If it was always, I could kind of get it, but just only during your turn seems kind of eh. Because, I mean, first strike is good for attackers, but I think it's generally better for blockers. So, yeah, I mean, if you're playing some sort of go-wide deck that's also doing counters, then I could definitely get it. I'm going to give it a 2. I can't think of a specific deck for this, but maybe there's some sort of place for it. Kaito, Cunning Infiltrator. 1 blue 3 for a 3 loyalty planeswalker. When a creature you control deals combat damage to a player, put a loyalty counter on Kaito. For +1, up to one target creature you control can't be blocked this turn. Draw a card, then discard a card. For -2, you create a 2/1 blue ninja. And for -9, you create an emblem with whenever a player casts a spell, you create a 2/1 ninja. Yeah, I think this card's good. I'm going to give it a 6. Because in a go wide deck that I guess is also blue, in a go wide deck that's able to get in, all you have to do is hit 6 times, and then you can get that emblem, right? And it's not like that's not like, oh, you need to attack 6 times. You need 6 creatures to hit. That's it. If you get 6 tokens to hit, if you can get 6 Bitter Blossom Fairies to hit, doesn't even matter. Then you're in. And I think that whenever a creature whenever a player casts a spell, you create a 2/1. I think that's a lot better than it sounds, because if we're saying each player casts at least one spell per turn cycle, that's a 2/1 every turn, right? And even if you don't have some sort of immediate way to get value from that, it makes you really hard to attack, and then you're going to be even easier, like, you can just swing in. I think it's going to be pretty good, and I'm going to give it like a 6. Kiora, the Rising Tide. 2 and a blue for a 3/2. When it enters, draw 2, then discard 2, which I kind of like. And when it attacks, if there are 7 or more cards in your graveyard, you may create a Scion of the Deep, a legendary 8/8 blue octopus creature token. So basically, you can only create one of these octopuses because it's legendary. I think that's less good, but I think it's still interesting, so I'm going to call it a 5. I don't know how good it is as a commander. Well, okay, so as a commander, you go turn 1, play some sort of self-mill, right? Maybe if you're lucky, you can... I think if you could take your first 2 turns using self-mill cards, you mill yourself to at least 5, then she enters, you draw 2, discard 2, then you'll be at 7, and then turn 4, she attacks and creates an 8/8, so you have 11 power on the board, which is kind of commanding. However, once you have that 11 power, she's not really doing anything else. So I'm going to give her a 6. I kind of like that sort of game plan, but even then, it's just not perfect. So 6. Loot Exuberant Explorer. 2 and a green, you can play an additional land on each of your turns. That's only 1 land, that's not as good as Azusa. But it also has an ability for 4 green, tap it, look at the top 6 of your library. You can reveal a creature card with mana value less than or equal to the number of lands you control, and put it onto the battlefield. Put the rest on the bottom in a random order. Playing extra lands is good, but not... Azusa's good because of the sheer amount of lands you can play. 1 extra is good, but it's not amazing. And being stuck to mono green if it's your commander is kind of meh, because you're going to be ramping enough as is. I just don't think that's, super important. Ramping into its ability is good. You could cheat things out that are, quote-unquote hard to play. Gigantosaurus is a 5-mana 10/10, but it costs green. So this could be an easy way to cheat those sort of things out. But at the same time, do you really want Gigantosaurus? Sure, it's a 5-mana 10/10, but it doesn't have trample. So it's just, a little bit difficult. I'm gonna give this card a 5. It's not bad by any sense. But then again, I hate Loot. I hate Loot so much. I don't know what it is about him. I do not like him in any sort of way. I hate this little creature. It's like it's like Magic the Gathering tried to have their own Pikachu, and I don't like that shit. Next up is Lunar Insight. 2 and a blue sorcery, draw a card for each different mana value among non-land permanents you control. If you're playing this on curve, so you're playing this as a 3-drop, then you're only drawing 2 cards. That's not very good. However, if you're playing this later in the game, this could be a 3 mana draw 4, 5, 6. I think that can be really solid, especially with decks that are either cheating things out and or playing things for less than what they should be. You know, if you're playing your 7 drops for only 5 mana because they cost less for whatever reason, you know, for affinity or whatever else, you're going to have a bunch of cards out that are of different mana values. And I think this could be really valuable for a deck like that. So I'm going to give it a 7. But you know me, I love my my impractical 3 mana draw spells. My if any of you don't know, I fucking adore borrowing 100,000 arrows. You draw a card for each tap creature target opponent controls. Some games this is just terrible. Some games this does not work. And some games I've drawn like 10 cards off this. I love my somewhat impractical game state reliant 3 mana draw cards. Okay, that's just my thing. Midnight Snack. 2 and a black. At the beginning of your end step, if you attack this turn, create a food token. 2 and a black. Sacrifice this enchantment. Target opponent loses X life, where X is the amount of life you gain this turn. Because it's target opponent, I just don't think it's all that great. I'm going to give it a 2. Mossborn Hydra. 2 and a green. Trample. It enters with a +1/+1 counter. Landfall. Double the number of counters on it. I think this card's good as shit. I'm going to give it like a 7. Because okay, so Scute Swarm, right? Once you have the 6 lands or whatever, Scute Swarm creates a copy of itself, so it doubles your board, right? Mossborn Hydra doubles its power. If Scute Swarm is go wide, Mossborn Hydra is go high, or go tall, or whatever, right? You know, it's the same thing, just different directions. So I think Mossborn Hydra is pretty good, especially in a deck that can play multiple lands a turn, things like that. It can get really big, and I like that. So I'm gonna give it a 7. 9 Lives Familiar, 3 mana, 1/1. It enters with 8 revival counters on it if you cast it. When it dies, if it had a revival counter on it, return it to the battlefield with 1 fewer revival counters at the beginning of the next end step. So let's say you have Goblin Bombardment, right? And 9 Lives Familiar. On your turn, you sacrifice it, deal 1 damage to an opponent, it comes back on your end step. On your opponent's turn, you sacrifice it, comes back on their end step. Next opponent's turn, sacrifice it, comes back on end step. Each time it's going to come back with 1 less counter, sure, but you're dishing out damage the whole time. There's definitely a better use for it, but that's just like what came to my mind immediately. You can sacrifice it multiple times. You know, this is a scry 1 every turn with Viscera Seer. I think repeatably sacrificable creatures like this are good generally. So I'm just gonna give it a 6. I mean, sure, I can't name a specific deck right now, but like, let's just say Korvold, right? Korvold wants to sacrifice it over and over. I'll let Korvold do that. So yeah, I'm gonna give it a 6. Perforating Artist. 1 black-red, 3/2 Death Touch. At the beginning of your end step, if you attack this turn, each opponent loses 3 life unless they sacrifice a non-land permanent or discards a card. Because it's only a one-time thing, I'm gonna give it a 1. If it was like a repeatable way to make your opponent sacrifice shit, I could put it higher. But even then, this is a 40 life format. Oh wait, but it is at the beginning of your end step. It's not when it enters. So having your opponent have to choose either sacrificing something or losing 3 life, I don't think matters as much in a 40 life format. However, the fact that it is on your end step every turn, if you attacked, I'm going to give it a 2. Because I feel like there is some sort of pressure you can put up with this. That could be valuable. Prideful Parent. 2 and a white for a 2/2. I'm going to be so for real. This card looks fucking AI generated to me. Just like how the eyes are, something about this one's eyes, something about the blue here, like just something seems off. I don't like it, but I'm not that person to make that kind of, accusation, whatever. It just looks a little funky. Um, but 2 and a white for a 2/2. When it enters, create a 1/1, and it has vigilance. It's a 1. I just don't see a deck that really wants this. I mean, I guess you can flicker it to create a bunch of 1/1s, but there's just better ways to do that. Refute, counter target spell, draw a card, then discard a card. I mean, sure, you're paying 1 extra, so it's worse than counter spell, but it's better than cancel. So I'll give it a 4. Rune Sealed Wall. 2 and a blue, Defender, 0/6, Surveil 1 by tapping it. Unless your deck really wants to Surveil, I just don't see much of a place for this. But I'll give it a 2, because I don't think it's bad. Arcades could use it pretty well. This is a card I've been excited for. Scrawling Crawler. 3 mana, 3/2. At the beginning of your upkeep, each player draws a card. Whenever an opponent draws a card, that player loses 1 life. This goes in Nekusar, this goes in Shieldred, this goes in all those decks, okay? This card's... Let's be realistic here. It's a auto-include for that sort of deck. And that sort of deck only. Like Howling Mine sees play outside of those decks because just drawing is good. This is 2 damage every turn cycle, but it's losing life, so you're not getting those damage-based effects. So I'm going to give it a 5. It has a defined deck place. At worst, it's just drawing you cards. And it draws your opponent's cards too. I'm just gonna give it a 5. I like it. Seeker's Folly, 2 and a black. Target opponent discards 2 cards, or creatures your opponents control get -1/-1 until end of turn. I'm gonna give it a 1. I think the discard part is kind of good, but the other part just is not useful. Yup. Probably last card, Spinner of Souls, 2 and a green, 4/3, reach. When a non-token creature you control dies, you can reveal cards from the top of your library until you reveal a creature. Put that card into your hand and the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. I'm going to give this card a 6. In non-token based... I'll give it a 7. In non-token based creature decks, this is a way to keep getting creatures back. Yeah, so not that you're getting creatures back, but it's going to keep your board full. Because when your non-token creature dies, you then just get another creature into your hand. And I think there's something really valuable about that. I think it'll keep your hand full if you need your hand full. It'll keep your board full because you can just keep playing creatures. I think that's just going to be really solid. Plus it's a spider, which seems like that's going to be a more and more popular type. And spirits are okay. So, yeah. That's going to be it. I know what you're saying. But MTG, man, there's so we stopped right here. So there's 15, 45, 60, 65 more cards to go. Because goddamn, this is a big ass set. I will try and make a part 2 to this and have it up ASAP. But until then, I have been MTG Man. Let me know if there's anything I missed, if there's any cards you think that are going to be really good in Standard and Modern, things like that. And I will see you in the next one. Peace. Do I have a catchphrase? It's been a while. It's been a while. I can't remember my catchphrase. Like and subscribe. I don't know. I'm like flipping you off, but you can't see. Bye.